They called it a communication breakdown. That's how my termination letter phrased it. But that's not what happened. What happened is this. I reported a potential chemical leak at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning, and 12 hours later, I was fired. My name is Victor Chow. I'm 48 years old, and I've worked in industrial operations for over 2 decades, most recently as a night shift production supervisor at Valence Nova Chemical in Sarnia, Ontario. If you know Sarnia, you know it's not called Chemical Valley for nothing. Tens of thousands of liters of flammable, corrosive, and toxic materials flow through those pipelines every hour. You don't guess. You don't hope. You don't take chances. That's what I thought, at least. That night, something didn't feel right. We were running a late-stage polymerization batch, and the pressure readings on Tank 4B had spiked briefly, then dipped. The sensors didn't trigger an alert, but I've worked with this system long enough to know when it's lying, so I called it in. I initiated a partial shutdown of Line 2, following standard emergency protocol. By 3:10 a.m., the plant manager, Rajiv Singh, was on the line. "Victor," he said, voice clipped, "we didn't authorize a shutdown." "I followed the emergency flowchart," I replied calmly. "We could be looking at a gasket failure in a high-risk vessel." "There's no evidence of a leak. There wasn't when Lac Mégantic was still standing either," I said. "Evidence sometimes shows up too late." Silence. Then, "Power it back up. We'll review it in the morning." I held my ground. I'd rather be wrong and alive than right and evacuated. He hung up. At 6 a.m., when the day crew arrived, I handed off the shift and stayed late to file a full report. I included logs, timestamps, screenshots, and notes. Everything documented. By 3 p.m., I was in the HR office. Rajiv didn't even show up. Instead, a woman from corporate delivered a pre-written notice. "You're being terminated for causing unnecessary panic and disrupting operations without sufficient cause." I asked her one question. "Did anyone check the pressure valve on Tank 4B? She didn't answer. They escorted me out with a cardboard box. No warning, no thank you. 20 years of spotless safety records meant nothing. 2 years of night shifts during COVID. Forgotten. I sat in my truck for half an hour before turning the key, and I knew, even before I pulled away from the lot, that this wasn't over. They thought they could silence me. They thought I'd walk away like a good little employee. But they forgot one thing. I still had the logs. I still had the emails. And I still gave a damn. I didn't sleep that night. Elaine, my wife, left for her nursing shift at 7 a.m. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at my old work boots like they were some kind of joke. 24 years in this industry, and I'd never been let go. Not once. Until now. And for what? Following protocol? I opened my laptop, pulled up the backup files I'd saved over the years. You see, I've always kept a personal record of everything. Not because I didn't trust people, but because experience taught me not to trust systems built to protect corporations. Emails, sensor logs, maintenance reports, photos, video clips, notes from safety drills, even text messages from night crew. It was all there, and not just from this week. I found a folder labeled B-Level 2022 Vent Stack Issue. That incident never made it to official reporting channels. Then another from 6 months ago. Cleaning solvent leak, line 7, re-pressurized too early. Each time I had flagged something, it had been downplayed, ignored, or buried. Each time I had been told, "Don't overreact, Victor. We can't afford delays." And now. They'd fired me for being consistent. At 10:15 a.m., I created a new Gmail account, one I wouldn't tie to anything else. Valence whistleblower checkmail.com I may have drafted an email to the Ontario Ministry of Labour, specifically the Occupational Health and Safety Branch. Attached were selected incident logs and photos, just enough to start a formal inquiry. I wrote, "This plant has a pattern of suppressing internal safety concerns and falsifying inspection reports. I am a recently terminated employee with direct knowledge of these events. I am willing to cooperate further if confidentiality can be ensured." I hesitated, then clicked send. At 11:06 a.m., I forwarded the same package to Environment and Climate Change Canada. Leaks at Valence Nova didn't just endanger workers, they polluted the St. Clair River Basin. Someone had to care. By noon, I'd started organizing the rest of the files onto a secure USB drive. One copy hidden in my garage, another placed in our safety deposit box at the credit union. I knew what could come next: legal threats, character assassination, maybe even criminal allegations for removing sensitive data. But I wasn't backing down. At 1:35 p.m., my phone rang. "Victor Chow?" a voice asked. "Yes." "This is Allison from the Ministry of Labor. We received your submission. Can you speak freely?" I closed the kitchen door behind me. "Yes, I can." It was 2 days later when I heard from him. The message came through Signal, an encrypted app I hadn't used since my cousin's union case 5 years ago. "Vic, it's Naveen. We need to talk. Not here. Coffee time on Confederation. Back corner. Tonight. 9. Naveen Singh. Process Tech, night shift. Rajiv's younger cousin. We'd never been close, but we weren't enemies either. He was sharp, kept to himself, and, more importantly, knew how the systems worked under the surface. That night I showed up early, brought my own mug, ordered black coffee and waited. He slipped into the booth like a shadow. No eye contact, no hello. "You were right," he said quietly. "About 4B. My pulse jumped. "We did a manual inspection after you left. Gasket was cracked. There was a leak. Small, but it would have worsened under pressure." I stared at him. "They fix it?" He nodded. "Replaced it, covered it up, wrote in the log that it was a sensor miscalibration. Rajiv signed off." I leaned back. "Of course." "They're scared, Vic," he continued. "Ever since you got fired, there's been whispering. People are nervous. Someone from Environment Canada showed up this morning. Quiet visit, no jacket, no badge, just questions." I said nothing. Naveen pulled a small flash drive from his coat pocket. "This has the last 8 months of manual overrides. Sensor logs, maintenance notes, the real ones. I didn't reach for it. Why are you doing this?" He finally looked at me. "My brother works in waste treatment, lives in Corunna with his kids. They drink water from the river. I'm not going to be part of something that poisons them." I took the drive. We didn't shake hands, didn't say goodbye. He left through the back door. I sat there for another 30 minutes watching steam rise from my mug. At home, I opened the drive on a clean, air-gapped laptop. No internet. What I found made my stomach turn. There were logs of pressure overrides, chemical concentrations exceeding, allowable limits, gas release events that were never reported. Dozens of them. Even more disturbing. A spreadsheet of inspector prep notes. A literal checklist of which machines to shut down, which tanks to paint over, which logs to lose before every scheduled audit. And Rajiv's name was all over it, along with 2 names I hadn't expected: Marta Dolan, Director of Plant Operations; Joseph Lynn, VP of Risk Management. This wasn't just about one bad decision or one faulty gasket. This was coordinated, systematic, deliberate. They were gambling with people's lives, workers, families, entire neighborhoods downwind. Just to save time and money, I copied everything, encrypted backups on 3 devices, printed summaries and stored them off-site. By the time Elaine got home, I was still at the dining table. Her eyes dropped to the flash drive in my hand. "Please tell." Me? "That's not what I think it is," she said. "It's worse," I replied. And I meant it. I didn't go to the media right away. I'm not stupid. In cases like this, if you go public too soon, they circle the wagons. They crush you before you even get traction. Instead, I kept feeding documents quietly. The Ministry of Labour Environment Canada. The Provincial Hazardous Materials Office. A week passed, and then came the fire drill, except it wasn't a drill. At 2:18 a.m. during a routine solvent transfer, something ignited near Tank 5A. Small explosion. Minor fire. No casualties, thank God. But the automatic suppression system failed, and the secondary alarm system triggered late. In a facility like Valence Nova, delays cost lives. It was all over the news by morning. Local outlets first, then regional. Minor. Explosion at chemical plant raises safety concerns. Workers evacuated after overnight fire at Sarnia facility, and just like that, the dam started to crack. By noon, a journalist from the Toronto Star found me. Her name was Laura Keeley. I don't know how she tracked me down, maybe a leak from inside the ministry, but she showed up on my doorstep with a press badge, a notepad, and a look that said she wasn't leaving. "Mr. Chow," she began carefully, "I'm investigating safety oversight failures at chemical plants in Ontario. Your name was mentioned as someone who might know things." I didn't confirm or deny anything. Instead, I asked her one question. "How serious are you?" She didn't blink. "I've taken on corporate lawsuits before. I'm still standing." I believed her, so I gave her enough to start digging, but not everything. Not yet. I mentioned the falsified inspections, the manipulated sensor logs, the retaliation against employees who spoke up. I told her where to file access to information requests, which agencies were already investigating, which public reports could be cross-referenced to find the gaps. She took careful notes. Didn't push for more. Professional. B. The next day, her article hit the front page. Not just a blurb about an overnight fire, a full exposé connecting Valence Nova to a pattern of safety violations, regulatory cover-ups, and falsified compliance reports. She didn't use my name, but inside the plant, they knew exactly who stirred the pot. Frankly, I didn't care anymore. Within 24 hours of publication, the ministry issued an emergency inspection order. Multiple inspectors, unannounced, armed with forensic tools, not just clipboards. The same afternoon, I received an email from an Environment Canada officer. "We are escalating this matter for criminal review. Thank you for your cooperation." Elaine found me standing at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, staring at the frozen backyard. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "It's starting," I said, because I knew the explosion was just the tip of the iceberg. The real disaster, the one buried in emails and hidden behind fake inspection sheets, was about to surface. And when it did, it wouldn't just bring down a few managers, it would take the whole rotten system with it. The first executive to go was Joseph Lynn, VP of Risk Management, the man who once told me that perception of safety was more important than actual safety. He resigned for personal reasons 3 days after the Toronto Star exposé. Then came Marta Dolan, Director of Plant Operations. She didn't resign. She was escorted out of the building by uniformed officers during the lunch shift change. Someone filmed it. The video went viral in less than 6 hours. Rajiv Singh held on for a few more days. He tried to shift the blame, called the explosion an unforeseeable equipment malfunction in a press release. But investigators had already found the altered sensor logs. They had the raw data now. Thanks to Naveen's flash drive and my backups, the paper trail was airtight. Then the real hammer dropped. The Ministry of Labour and Environment Canada issued a joint enforcement action, something that hadn't happened. In a decade, immediate suspension of Valence Nova's operating license, frozen accounts, facility sealed under hazardous site protocol. They weren't just shutting down the plant. They were preparing criminal charges. Not just for negligence. Fraud, obstruction of justice. Willful endangerment of public safety. And it didn't stop there. 2. City councilors were named in a secondary report. Turns out they'd accepted campaign donations in exchange for fast-tracking environmental approvals. Suddenly, no one wanted to be connected to Valence Nova. Not the mayor, not the city planning board, not the corporate sponsors who used to brag about partnerships with industry leaders. The entire ecosystem turned on itself. Gregory Stein, the retired founder of a rival company, reached out to me. "I want to meet," he said. "We've had our differences over the years, Victor, but what you did, that took guts." We met at a coffee shop on London Line. He'd brought a manila folder. Inside were handwritten notes, emails, and a list of employees he trusted, people who still cared about doing things right. "Valence Nova's dead," he said plainly, "but there are good people who don't deserve to go down with it." "I agree. I'm forming a new coalition," he said. "Small firms, independent operators, real oversight. We'll rebuild the plant from scratch, this time with transparency." I looked him in the eye. "You sure the industry's ready for that?" He smiled. "I don't care if they're ready. They'll adapt." That night, I got a text from Naveen. "Rajiv arrested. CBC running story at 6. You did it, man." But it wasn't about doing it. Not really. It was about stopping something, before it killed someone. It was about finally proving that just following orders wasn't good enough. That night, I watched the CBC segment with Elaine. They blurred my name, but they called me the anonymous source who refused to stay silent. And for the first time in weeks, I slept. 6 weeks later, I stood on the edge of an empty lot. Snow still clung to the edges of the gravel. The remains of Valence Nova had been bulldozed to the ground, scrubbed clean like it had never existed. Nothing but frozen dirt and a few lonely fence posts. Elaine parked behind me and got out, pulling her jacket tighter against the wind. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. But it wasn't just about the cold. I was starting over. At 48, after everything, Gregory's new company, ClearPath Industrial, was different from the start. No shareholders breathing down our necks. No corner-cutting for quarterly reports. Just a dozen small contractors, some retired regulators, and a mission: build it safe, build it right, or don't build it at all. Gregory had offered me a senior role right away, Director of Operations Compliance. Not a title I ever asked for, but one I intended to honor. My first day back on site, the difference was obvious. The crew meetings weren't just 5-minute formalities anymore. We walked every inch of the site together, checked every valve, every weld, every bolt. At the end of each day, reports were triple-checked, and nobody lost anything conveniently. People asked real questions. And maybe for the first time in my career, management actually listened. Naveen came on board too. He now headed up process safety. "I still don't trust suits," he joked one morning. "But at least now we are the suits." Even Donna, the purchasing agent who leaked the first batch of emails, found a spot with us. She managed materials procurement like a hawk, insisting on full traceability for every component that came through the gate. Elaine noticed the change in me almost immediately. "You sleep better," she said one evening as we painted the guest. "Bedroom together?" "Yeah," I said, rolling fresh primer onto the wall. "It's different when you're not fighting your own company every day. Better for your blood pressure," she teased. "Better for everybody's," I said. The money wasn't spectacular. We weren't backed by billionaires or hedge funds, but I didn't care. We weren't building skyscrapers or billion-dollar pipelines. We were building trust. One valve, one beam, one foundation at a time. And for the first time in years, I could look at a finished structure and feel proud again. Because I knew every inspection was real. Every signature meant something. Every worker on that site could go home safe to their families at night. That was worth more than any bonus or title or stock option. It was worth everything. It was a Tuesday morning in early May. The sun hadn't fully broken through the clouds, but the frost had finally let go of the ground. I stood at the gate of our new facility. Not Valence Nova. Not a rebirth. Something else entirely. A fresh start. The final concrete slab had been poured the week before, curing nicely under thermal blankets. Every inch of it tested, verified, certified. Behind me, the new control room was humming quietly. Solar-assisted, low emission, fully redundant. We'd done it right this time. Not fast, not cheap. Right. A young engineer named Chloe stepped beside me, clipboard in hand. "Inspection crews here," she said. "Walk through in 10?" I nodded. "Let's make it boring," I said. She smiled. "Boring means safe." She got it as she walked off. I turned my eyes back to the clearing beyond the fence, where Tank 4B once stood, where it all started. The gasket, the shutdown, the firing, the lies. There'd been days I questioned myself. Nights I wondered if staying silent would have been easier. But every time I came back to the same answer. The cost of silence is always higher than the cost of truth. People forget that sometimes. They think quiet means safe. That if nobody talks about it, then it isn't real. But silence is where danger grows, where pressure builds, where chemicals gather, unseen, unspoken, until the day they explode. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't trying to burn anything down. I just couldn't let them keep hiding what could have killed all of us. And now we build things we can stand beside. With our names on the paperwork and our principles in every pipe, every line of code, every checklist. Elaine pulled up in her car just as the inspectors entered the building. She waved through the windshield and gave me a thumbs up. She'd been my anchor through it all. As she parked, I glanced down at the concrete under my boots. Level, clean, solid. It wasn't just a foundation, it was a promise. That no matter what happened, who got promoted, who got fired, who got paid, we'd never cut corners again. Because lives aren't worth deadlines. And some victories aren't about winning. They're about refusing to lose the things that matter most.